higher education and what it's doing to young minds, destroying them. But we don't just say things, we actually prove it. So here is a report that I filed yesterday from the University of Texas.
Ask you a couple quick questions. Now, have you been following Trump's tax plan at all, or do you know anything about that? Well, just in general, like, what would you think about a Trump tax plan?
I don't really know anything about it, so.
Do you know anything about Trump's plan?
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with it.
Mind just kind of stepping aside so we don't get run over here? Have you guys been paying attention at all to Trump's tax plan?
Very little bit.
So, I don't know if have you been following Trump's tax plan at all?
Yes, I have.
And what do you think about it?
Well, I think it's got some real issues.
I mean, are you a supporter of Trump? Do you not like Trump?
Don't like him.
Okay, not a fan of Trump. So you probably, I mean, do you think you would like his tax plan?
No.
I think that it gives people money back, but it's under the guise of helping out the middle class, when in reality it kind of helps out his cronies and the people he'd planned to help out with to begin with.
I'm not a fan of Trump or his tax plan.
Well, I feel the burn.
Yeah?
Still do, but...
Well, don't you think, I mean, there's a couple highlights here. We're trying to get people to agree. There's a couple highlights from Bernie's proposed tax plan. For example, he wants to preserve tax credits for people that produce electricity from wind, biomass, geothermal, solar, stuff like that. Would you support something like that in a tax plan?
Absolutely.
Power stuff that's, more sustainable, renewable. He wants to provide tax credits for that. Would you get behind something like that?
Absolutely.
Would you support that?
Yeah.
Would you support that?
Yes.
People that work with renewable energy, sustainable energy like wind, you would support that?
Of course.
Yes, yeah. I'm not super educated on this subject, so I don't really want to put forward a lot of opinions.
What about the child tax credit? Bernie's plan wants to double the child tax credit to make it $2,000 per kid that's a dependent, so that some of those, middle-class families or whatever that have multiple children, they keep some of that money in their own pocket. Is that something you support in a tax plan?
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Well, the child tax credit, so they keep some of that money. Would you support that?
Absolutely.
You would support that?
Yeah.
These are getting more of the money. They're keeping more of their own money. Do you like that part of the plan?
I do.
I don't think so.
No, you don't like that? What about you?
Ooh, I'm on the fence on that one, to be honest.
And why don't you like that?
People might abuse it.
So they might start having kids and...
Yeah, just to get a tax deduction, and it wouldn't be good.
Well, they'd still be paying more for having a kid, though.
That is true.
So I'll just give you one more here, and we'll let you go. He wants a repatriation tax. So basically, some of these assets and monies that are sitting overseas that people have been trying to avoid the taxes at, he wants to put a mandatory tax on that as a repatriation effort.
Like offshore bank accounts, etc.
Yeah, is that something that you would support in a tax plan?
Yeah, definitely.
And it sets a mandatory tax on that so that they have to pay for all those funds that they're trying to keep, untaxed overseas. Would that be something you support too?
Oh, yeah.
That you can't just put these funds over there or have them sitting over there without taxing them. Would you support that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Just have that sitting over there or move the money over there without paying taxes. Would you support that?
Yeah, if it would alleviate, the taxes that lower-income families have to pay, then yes.
Cold hard cash that these corporations and people have overseas, a mandatory tax. Would you support that?
Finding it. Yeah, I support it, but it's so lawyered up and buried in, it's good luck finding it.
Okay, so now what if I actually just told you Trump's tax plan?
Then, clearly I don't know what I'm doing.
So how do you feel about it now?
Then I have to relook at the facts, because I don't trust anything that comes out of his presidency.
Now, what if I told you that I actually just read to you Trump's tax plan?
I'd be surprised. I'd kind of believe it, honestly. I'm really bad at politics and all this stuff. I'm science major.
I agree with this.
Okay, so now what if I just told you that I actually read you Trump's tax plan?
I think those are things that I'm speechless.
You may not like Trump, but maybe some of his policies are good.
We'll see.
All right. Well, that's what just happened. So you just said you supported his tax plan.
Okay.
Hey, thank you for your time, ma'am. You were wonderful. Have a great day, okay? Thank you.
Fake news.
And then she tells me I'm fake news after she falls for fake news. That's what happens at UT. Liberals completely clueless. This hour is about to get lit with Roger Stone and Tyler Nixon joining me, and we've got all kinds of news that we can cover. Tyler Nixon believes he has discovered another Soros front group. Of course, they identify as Democrats. Surprise, surprise. We've got developing news right now with the Fusion GPS investigation and the Russian dossier investigation. That's going on. Joe Arpaio is considering running for Senate. So with that, I'll bring in Roger Stone. Roger, this is something... I'm sorry, guys. What was that? Okay. So, well, then let's go to Tyler then. Tyler, I haven't had too much time to delve into this yet, but I've got the documents. Yes, I have the documents right here that you emailed me. Now,
in my hand.
I have the documents. I'm Julian Assange. I have the documents. So you think, though, you have discovered a Soros front group, the Friends of Democracy here. Like I said, I haven't gotten too much into this, so I'm just going to pitch this over to you. What do you believe you have found out here?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give the tease, the short version of it, because I haven't actually gotten that far into it. I want to do a little more background research on it, but the bottom line is this was posted at 8chan, and I picked it up from Twitter, and it's basically got... it looks like an operations order, an actual military type or an organizational operations order with a lot of codes and detail that give it a great deal of authenticity, in my opinion, as a former Army infantry officer. And I honestly believe that it really reveals that around the time the first BLM riots occurred in April of 2015, I believe it was, they were coordinating this. This group was talking about violence. They were talking about friendly LEs and, hostile LEs, meaning some law enforcement was hostile to them, that they could get away with a certain level of violence. And the purpose of the whole thing is to instigate unrest, civil unrest. And it was discovered apparently by a guy who was visiting his brother, and he couldn't understand where his brother was getting all this money, who had no obvious gainful employment, worked at Foot Locker, was the black sheep of the family. And so basically he said he just got nosy. The guy's out during a Christmas visit, and he says, I'm going to go through, rummaging through his stuff. I mean, probably an invasion of the guy's privacy, but lo and behold, this is what he comes across. And like I said, this would be a very elaborate hoax. I'm sure it could be done, but it just seems, everything rings true. I mean, my BS meter is not going off.
Well, and here's the thing, too. It kind of, based on what I've seen, it kind of jives with what we've seen in more recent years with Antifa and the George Soros, Trump protest that he's funding, where they have all this violence planned. You had the event where actually multiple members of Antifa have either been investigated or potentially even arrested, I believe, for terrorist activity or violence and felonies. You had the instance where guys were caught trying to send gas into a Trump event through the ventilation system in the I think it was the DC press corps. So this, this is something that we've actually seen come to fruition recently with Soros funded movements.
Oh, I mean, I've looked, I remember watching some of the videos from the Boston Antifa, each city has sort of had its own series of events or incidents, I guess you could say, that all coalesced around the time of either before or after the Berkeley, riots and so forth. And I've watched the videos and observed, who was, and you did obviously your own. I didn't see it quite in Austin, but I remember in Boston, I saw individuals who were wearing masks who looked to me like intelligence agents. Having been in the military, you can identify someone who doesn't fit in like the, the sort of freak show types that you get, the alternative, whatever. I mean, they tend to be sort of, they look out of place. You know what I mean? They're not well dressed, but there were people who were older.
Seasoned. They seem to be seasoned at, kind of generaling a situation.
They were dressed like, first of all, they were monitoring the filming of it and saying, we would like you to stop, and not menacing, not going up to the point of being like, or else or anything like that. They were very controlled. They were looked totally behind a mask, but looked almost as though they would be like drug agents you'd see, who wear very sort of plain clothes. They wear jeans, usually maybe Timberlands used to. Now they wear something, they wear something that's appropriate. They weren't, wearing the typical accoutrement of the, anti-freaks, which, is whatever, like you see on the screen, these, I don't know, it's just they're quite a bunch. I mean, honestly, on the fringes of sanity and society. And, you know, it's a shame that they're led so astray by such a heinous and, heinous ideology and really, really despicable, repugnant types of operators who are trying to undermine civil society in the United States, and for the purposes of their left-wing globalist agenda. I mean, it's very insidious. It's very diabolical. We hear of all the money that flows into it. Where do we think that's going? And why wouldn't this document, come to light? I mean, it looks to me authentic. I want to research the actual organization. If you can pull up that first page, I guess you actually have more of it than I actually pulled. But as I was saying about the Boston rally, there were two people there who were standing there being filmed and monitoring, but they did have face masks on. They looked older. Now, again, they seemed like intelligence working with sort of the inner, maybe elders, so to speak. Usually you get at least one, as you noticed, older sort of liberal, who can actually speak to a liberal, truly, not just some Antifa communist, sort of brainwashed, claptrap social, justice warrior Marxist types who are just completely out of touch with reality, with how the world works, with human nature. They don't see the inherent contradiction within their own supposed ideology. It's barely an ideology. It's more of a dogma that they've been indoctrinated
Well, I'm beginning to think it's just an excuse to riot and be violent.
That too. Yeah, I mean, there's that element as well. But they're militant, regardless of whether they're violent or not. They're militant. And I felt as though that there were people, I don't know where they could be from Soros, who knows? It could be deep state folks who were sort of very much directing what went on. Not directing, well, there might have been some directing the actual violence, but it seemed like, though, they were trying to keep an order to it and actually organizing it like a militia in this Boston instance. And I would urge anyone to go and take a look at various films of it. There's one in particular, a couple of photojournalists, who were being asked to leave and to stop. And, they were being not menaced, I said, but the two guys who were standing there with them did not look like radical Marxist, older types, burnout hippies, whatever. They didn't look legitimate, they didn't look like legitimate Antifa. They looked legitimate, though, in every other way. And that raised my hackles. That raised my sort of army, infantry, as well as, military background and, working with the government and, understanding law enforcement as an attorney and otherwise. I felt that was going on. And this would validate that. This would validate that the people that we were dealing with, or that I saw, that they were dealing with, the alternative media, the reporters, the on-site reporters, were the people who would operate off a document like this. Whereas you're not just going to hand this out to anybody. You know what I'm saying? These are the mercenaries, effectively. And, what's in here is very, very detailed and very diabolical. And I would
it certainly would. It would certainly warrant.
There wouldn't be more investigation by.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I would think that this would certainly warrant an investigation, especially if they're already thinking about looking into Antifa, or some of them are already being investigated. You would think something like this would intrigue someone enough to potentially look into that. And, this is where my head goes. When you're sitting here talking about Boston and you ID'd these two guys that didn't seem like the typical Antifa, seemed more like a typical, military training per se. I remember
intelligence officers, controllers, whatever you want to call them.
And I don't know if you don't have to comment on this if you don't feel comfortable, but I remember when the Boston Marathon bombing happened, there were all of these images surfacing of what looked like Skull and Bones members out there with the Skull and Bones logo, dressed in, military garb. While that whole thing was going on, they said there was a training drill going on at the library right across from where the explosion happened. So that's just me making the connection as far as the Boston thing goes, because that was in Boston. And then this document.
I never thought of that. That's a valid, certainly a valid analogy.
Because that's what you saw. You're speaking to the events that you saw in Boston, where some of these guys dressed up as Antifa didn't really fit the bill of a common Antifa member. All right, we got to take a break. We're going to have more on this on the other side with Tyler Nixon. This is The War Room. Roger Stone will be joining us as well. Don't go anywhere.
As technology has advanced in America, it has increasingly encroached on one of those liberties, what I term the right of personal privacy. Modern information systems, data banks, credit records, mailing list abuses, electronic snooping, the collection of personal data for one purpose that may be used for another, all these have left millions of Americans deeply concerned by the privacy they cherish. And the time has come, therefore, for a major initiative to define the nature and extent of the basic rights of privacy and to erect new safeguards to ensure that those rights are respected. I shall launch such an effort this year at the highest levels of the administration. And I look forward again to working with this Congress and establishing a new set of standards that respect the legitimate needs of society, but that also recognize personal privacy as a cardinal principle of American liberty.
And there you have President Richard Milhouse Nixon, 105 years old today. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Now, my longtime association with Richard Nixon is well known. This is your co-host, Roger Stone. And I'm still of the view that President Nixon is among our greatest presidents. There is his ending of the war in Vietnam on a much faster timetable than the Pentagon desired. There is his opening of the door to China, his reaching a strategic arms limitation agreement with the Soviets, his skillful playing of the Soviets against the Chinese in the best interests of American peace, his desegregation of the public schools without bloodshed or violence, his launch of the war on cancer, his desegregation of the public trade unions, federal revenue sharing, recognizing that tax revenues can best be spent by government at the lowest possible local level. Certainly, we'd be remiss not to mention his two great failures, wage and price controls and removing us from the gold standard, and of course, the ignominious failure of the war on drugs. But upon reflection, we recognize the enormous achievements of one of our greatest presidents. How ironic that his birthday falls one day after Elvis Presley. And yesterday we celebrated the birthday of the king. Today we celebrate the birthday of the president. Tyler, I know this is a subject on which you obviously have some bias, being a distant relative, I think a great nephew of the late president, but your reflections on the Nixon presidency on his birthday.
Well, I think President Nixon is, as I was told from when I was young by people who didn't like Nixon necessarily, that he was the most underrated and probably ill-served by historians, not by history, presidents in the modern era, basically. Nixon was a unique figure, a towering figure in many ways, who was self-made. And that's the main thing. He came from probably the most dirt poverty possible, besides perhaps Harry Truman, I think, comes to mind. But otherwise, Nixon came from a very humble background and drove his way through sheer will and sheer hard work, put himself through, came from nothing to go to Whittier College in California, on to Duke Law School, served in the Navy in World War II in the South Pacific, and, never saw, I don't think, direct combat. And, got to sort of, but was certainly in harm's way, just as everyone was who served in the South Pacific or in any theater in World War II. He came back, immediately designed to run for Congress in 1946, took on communism. He had immediately identified the fact that, yes, we had defeated the Hun and fascism and in the Nazis, the National Socialists in Germany, but that, the communist threat was just another variety of the same thing. And he immediately saw the menace that immediately saw the menace in the United States. I could just hear you then, Roger. Are you with us? Well, I think Roger's.
I think we're having some phone troubles there with Roger. I'm wondering, because I wasn't alive for the Nixon days, but kind of in the brief history. I'm not claiming to be an expert by any stretch, but I'm wondering, do you think it's a fair comparison to say that, because you were saying historians, treat the Nixon years, the Nixon presidency, not with fairness, but I'm curious if during the Nixon years, you didn't kind of see what we're seeing right now with the establishment attack on Trump, just a lighter version. You know, it was kind of a lighter version, and maybe Nixon, you know, had some skeletons in the closet. But it seems to me like that was kind of the original, like, light establishment attack on a president would be the Nixon years.
They have two ways of taking out presidents. One is by physical assassination, the other is political assassination. Kennedy was physical. Nixon was a political assassination by the deep state intelligence. And not that he, you know, didn't set himself up for things, but at the same time, he did nothing that was anything compared to Lyndon Johnson, who was a amoral psychopath who ordered murders. The Clintons, I mean, Nixon looks like a piker, an altar boy. He couldn't even lie on national television to try to cover up the damage it was doing to the presidency, not just to him. Without breaking out into a sweat and becoming, you know, he wasn't even a good liar because he wasn't comfortable with it. Whereas, you know, you get a Bill Clinton can get up there and tell you the sky is green, you know, and people lap it up with a spoon.
I never had sexual relations with that woman, period.
Emphatically lie to the camera, you know, with conviction. I mean, Nixon could never muster.
The liberals tell us that no person is above the law. But if you look now at the transgressions of Nixon and you compare them with the transgressions of, say, Obama, it really does make Nixon look like a piker. We know from the FISA court warrant disclosures in November that 30,000 people were surveilled for political purposes. This is political espionage. Obama used the machinery and the authority of the federal government to spy on his political enemies. Nixon was accused of running a private operation to break into the Democratic National Headquarters, where they never really planted bugs that actually worked. It was a bungled operation, and no one has ever established that Nixon himself knew about this or approved it in advance. In fact, former Watergate prosecutor Nick Ackerman has lied on MSNBC repeatedly saying, oh, we just didn't look far enough. Nixon knew everything, we just never proved it. No, Nick, there's no proof of that whatsoever. How does somebody like that continue to be admitted to the bar, Tyler? Why does a liar like Nick Ackerman allowed to attack one of our greatest presidents on the basis of no facts whatsoever?
Well, you know, no, Ackerman, whatever his name is, Fakerman, is worse than a liar. He's a deceiver. He is a partisan Kennedy Democrat, liberal Democrat, posing as a prosecutor, posing as a disinterested dispenser of justice. These people are a fraud because they've tried to co-opt our government and our justice system to take down a president, and they're doing the same today.
You know, and the amazing thing is we have the names. We know what happened. Peter Strzok, as an insurance policy in case Hillary lost, using Hillary's backers, created the fake dossier that then they spied on Trump, which now they're going on the witch hunt. I mean, we know it all happened. That's what happened.
Freedom Command Central, that's right. It's the War Room with my co-host Owen Schroyer, and riding shotgun with us today, my colleague Tyler Nixon. This just in, Steve Bannon has been ousted from the helm of Breitbart News. Now, this is extraordinary. This would be like Alex Jones being ousted at INFOWARS, something that's never going to happen. But I think it underlies the level of damage that Steve Bannon has sustained through his incredible act of personal treachery and a stunning act of disloyal to the president who made him. Steve Bannon didn't make Donald Trump. Donald Trump made Steve Bannon, made him a household name, or at least among activists. But it's now clear that Steve Bannon's apology tour has failed, and the president has let it be known to intimates that there will be no forgiveness, no coming back for Steve Bannon. I know this because a major candidate for governor in a very large state, who only a week and a half ago contacted me seeking the endorsement of Steve Bannon, called me last Friday and told me, never mind. Bannon now poison among primary voters in that state. It's understandable, I guess, if Bannon had made his comments about the president and his family after he had been fired from his White House job. Then at least you could chalk it up to anger about being terminated. But no, the facts are now in. Incredibly, Steve Bannon made these treacherous comments, this fundamental betrayal, while he was still on the White House payroll. He made them while laying on the couch in his opulent White House office. And of all people, Michael Wolff, a running dog lackey of the left, a man who even among serious mainstream media journalists is scoffed at as a fabricator of quotes and facts, was the one that Bannon unburdened himself to. Finished, in my opinion, as a force on the alt-right, Steve Bannon. Don't let the door hit you on the derriere on your way out. Tyler, your views?
Well, the old Jimmy Cliff song, the harder they come, the harder they fall. Steve Bannon cut short, I guess, Roger, your progression of how somebody becomes a political sensation. Who is Roger Stone? Get me Roger Stone, so forth. With Steve Bannon, my progression was, who is Steve Bannon? Now it's, who was Steve Bannon? I think this is just righteous, purging of the Quislings, and a troublesome Quisling at that. He worked with Peter Schweizer, I guess it was, Schweitzer, excuse me, in the 2015, early 2015 with the Ted Cruz people, and had shopped around whipping up a mob meme, meaning that Trump was mobbed up with organized crime, to basically see if they could launch that as a tactic to knock Trump out of the race. This is the same Steve Bannon who a year later is appointed as CEO of the Trump campaign, which goes to show you two things. Trump can bring his enemies, almost, his enemies, whoever, he can appoint people to be part of his organization who will slavishly work for him, even though they are really, betrayers and people who are deceivers, and still not do damage to him. I mean, it's a testament to his endurance and the fact that he is the main impetus. He is the master of his universe, to be able to bring these people close to him. And he's no fool. He knows the allegiances shift, and he knows a lot of them were against him. That's why he can rip somebody and still make up with them, be friends with them, and have alliances with them. Rand Paul. I mean, I'm looking at all these people who, he had said terrible things about them. They have the ability to, suck it up and move on because they realize it's part of Trump's overall shtick. But that when it gets down to it, he's a leader. People may not like it. He's not a traditional Obama type, this blow-dried, whatever it used to be called, blow-dried, sort of sonorous, very self-serious and just pompous politicians that we have. And people are sick of it. It's not real. And Trump is real, for better or worse. Look, I mean, he can be crass, he can be petty, but you don't get to be president and you don't really endure the assaults, the sustained assault, unlike any in our history, ever, against this man by every conceivable. Go ahead.
You make a very good point, Tyler. This is a quality I think that he shares with the great Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was able to bring Jim Baker, who had been the manager of George Bush's campaign against him, into the White House. There was never any time, however, that Jim Baker was disloyal to the president. Every opportunity he had to make Ronald Reagan look good, he took. He understood who the boss was, and he understood that his appointment to high public service was completely through the sufferance of Ronald Reagan. Not so, for example, with David Stockman, who is really the only example of Reagan pulling somebody into the circle and being betrayed. One of Reagan's great strengths in 1980 was he brought the Bush people in. He brought the Baker people in. He brought the Connolly people in, although there weren't many of them. He brought the Phil Crane people in. We had a united front against Jimmy Carter. It's the only reason why we beat him. And that served the president well. Reagan had Reagan people on the White House staff, as well as Bush people and others. Unfortunately, I think the president, perhaps inadvertently, has surrounded himself with a number of quislings that I do not trust. That's why I have talked on this show and on the Alex Jones show about a 25th Amendment strategy. It is a mistake to underestimate the deep enmity that the Republican elite still hold for Donald Trump. He slaughtered them in the primaries. He buried them, but they have never gotten over it as they did with Reagan, and they have never fully signed up, waiting only for the right moment to stab him in the back with a dagger. And that is my greatest fear. The great challenge for President Trump will not come from liberal Democrats. It will come from establishment Republicans. Better a snake in the grass than an asp in the bosom. Owen, what's your view here?
Well, I think when we look at 2018 for the midterms, you've already got a bunch of Republicans that are stepping down. And so that opens the seats there to a fresh blood, if you will, of the Republican Party. The question, I think, remains, who is going to kind of get the leverage or get the momentum or get the attention necessary in order to actually win those seats? Is it going to be another case where the GOP and the rhinos basically do anything they can to try to stop Trump's agenda, and they only want to promote and get people in office that are going to go against Trump and be the rhinos and go along with the establishment? Or will you have, grassroots campaign be able to make their way up through the GOP without getting the help from the funding, without getting the help from the super PACs or whatever the case may be? To me, that's the story that we're going to have to watch out for, because if we want to continue this great run that we've had under President Trump, obviously the midterms are going to be a necessary time for victory.
Look, I would take the view that the House and Senate Republicans are going to find that they need Donald Trump a lot more than Donald Trump needs them. If they're smart, they will rally to the president's reform agenda. The president has the ability to run against both of them, just like he ran for president against the elite leadership of both parties and the cookie-cutter, blow-dried politicians who are reading from their carefully scripted polls so as not to offend any voters and not make any waves. That's not the way of Donald Trump.
This is the War Room. We have been chatting with Tyler Nixon and Roger Stone here on the War Room, and it's all possible. Everything we do here at InfoWars, the man on the streets, the great guests, the 10 hours of live broadcast, the extended live broadcast, the specials, the expansion, the new studios, it's all possible thanks to you at InfoWarsStore.com. We have just released a brand new product with a 25% off introductory special, Immune Wall. Boost the immune system for support during stress, travel, and strenuous activity. That's the new product at InfoWarsStore.com, Immune Wall. And right now, it's flu season. There's all these bugs going around. It's cold. It's winter. The perfect time to try out Immune Wall. But don't forget about some of the other specials we have going right now. It's January 9th, and Alex is still continuing the New Year's specials, folks. So you're going to want to take advantage of this before he finally shuts that down. That includes 50% off Super Male Vitality, 50% off Alpha Power, 50% off Cell Force, 50% off Survival Shield X2, 50% off Vitamin Mineral Fusion, 50% off the Real Red Pill, 50% off Secret 12 Vitamin B12. All of that 50% off at InfoWarsStore.com, not to mention the extended free shipping. So think about that when you're ordering. The bigger your order gets, don't even think about the shipping costs going up, because it's free shipping store-wide at InfoWarsStore.com. So take advantage of all the great specials and fund us as we're learning more today. Google trying to shut us down. You got that lawsuit going on, so we already know that all of that's going on, and that's why it's more important now than ever to support us at InfoWarsStore.com. And we thank you, we salute you, and we promise we will not let you down. We will pay it forward. We will continue to expand in the face of fake news and the anti-human, anti-American establishment agenda. All right, so Tyler, we got one more segment together here. I want to get your comments on something. Now, guys, pull up the Jim Sciotto thread on Twitter right now. Tyler, I'm going to read this to you, and then I want to get your opinion, because I'm trying to figure this out. So it starts like this. This is a Twitter thread from Jim Sciotto over at CBC. It starts with this. Fusion GPS transcript contradicts GOP argument. Steele dossier was a political document. Well, first of all, that's just completely ridiculous. It was 100% a political document. It was about a president. So that's just absurd to say it's not a political document. It's 100% a political document. Then he says, Steele went to FBI himself, concerned of Trump being blackmailed, fearing national security threat. So I'm wondering if that's Steele basically going to the FBI saying, hey, guess what? The DNC and Hillary Clinton are paying me to make a document up about Trump. This could be a threat to national security. Then he goes on, when Steele met with the FBI in September, the FBI told him they had similar intelligence from, quote, an internal Trump campaign source. That right now looks like Steve Bannon. Then you have Fusion GPS's Glenn Simpson told Senate Judiciary that Steele reached out to FBI on his own, and he selected the content of the dossier, not the DNC or Fusion. But again, he has to mention DNC and Fusion GPS because they were behind it as well. Then this is where I want to get your expertise. So Senator Feinstein and committee Democrats released the transcript of Glenn Simpson's account over objections of their GOP colleagues today. So I'm curious, why do you think that document was released? We don't get any of these other documents released. Some of these hearings are done behind closed doors. What do you think is behind Senator Feinstein and the Democrats releasing that document today?
You know, oh, what a tangled web the Clintons weave whenever they practice to deceive, which is all they practice, and, you know, their ilk. It's so complicated, to be honest. It's difficult to determine people's true motives and what, it comes down to the Fusion GPS people were being paid by whoever the highest bidder was. They went from, I guess it was, not Chris Saliza, whoever it was at the Washington Spectator, whoever originally commissioned them to begin this investigation into Trump. And then, of course, it was taken over by the Democrats. And, from there, they called the tune. So let's face it. I think, they want to distance themselves from, they want to make it appear as though this sort of just came to the attention and it was only a minor part of the No, it was the whole ball of wax. Even McCain was running around town with it. I mean, it's one of these.
Which I think, honestly, at this point, I think they just took advantage of McCain's mental illness now. He probably, that guy, I don't even know if he's conscious anymore.
Yeah, they took advantage of his animus, frankly, his bitterness. McCain is a vindictive and bitter individual. I say that as someone who supported John McCain, who's met John McCain numerous times. I think he's a charming guy in person, but as a political operator, he has always been short-tempered, bitter in defeat, usually. Obama being an exception. I think he healed it. But I don't know what it is about these Arizona senators. Even Goldwater softened a little bit at the end of his life, but they seem to just come to Washington as conservatives and leave as, neoliberal.
Yeah, Jeff Flake, another one.
Flake, all of them. Yeah, no, it's terrible. I'm like, my brother lives in Arizona, and I'm thinking, what is going on with that? But anyway, the whole affair, it's all unraveling. They were so drunk on their sense of power, frankly, under the Obama administration. And you see the explosion with people. I never realized there was this latent sense that we own the universe from here forward in the Obama administration that gave rise to this psychotic break when Trump actually wins the presidency. Just how they went after him was unhinged enough. But then the fact that he won and how the reaction, it just keeps getting worse and worse. I think what these people, they're really, honestly, you have Yale, the epicenter of Trump hate and of, deep state fakery.
Which, by the way, it is now looking like it's going to be confirmed. Bandy Lee is not even currently licensed to practice psychiatry.
Well, she shouldn't be if she is, frankly, because she's a disgrace to her profession.
Not.
She's a partisan posing behind her profession and her professional credentials, which is what you see with every leftist, Clintonian, Democrat hack operative in Washington, D.C. They will co-opt whatever professional responsibilities, duties, ethics, anything they have, and sell it down the river to their partisan dogma.
But these are very skilled and seasoned professionals, though. So it would make sense that they would make Bandy Lee do this, who's not even licensed. So instead of having the licensed psychiatrist do it, which would then result in a malpractice lawsuit, that's illegal, they have the unlicensed professional do it. That way they avoid that legal trouble. But back to this Fusion GPS thing. So everyone's kind of scratching their heads. Why did the Democrats release this document, 312-page transcript of Fusion GPS's Glenn Simpson's account of what went on? But I actually think
confusion for starters, I'm sure.
Well, I think it's going to backfire though, because it actually provides more of a light into the people that are actually doing this investigation. So now we know, or at least according to this testimony, that it was Steele who, I mean, we already knew that, but it's now been completely confirmed. Steele wrote the dossier. He is the one that concocted it on his own accord, apparently. But we also know that there was funding behind it. So now Fusion GPS is kind of sitting here as a middleman saying, well, you know, we just do opposition research. So when we heard that this document was out there, we decided to share it with everyone. And, you know, we're not necessarily behind it. You know, that's kind of Christopher Steele. But then you look at Christopher Steele and you say, okay, well, why did he decide to push that document out, the dossier, and yet still to this day, why has it not been confirmed from anyone as a legitimate document?
Yeah, or whether the FBI paid for it when they obtained it, paid for the information. Frankly, Rosenstein refused to answer that. Why? Why would you not answer that? Is it a national security? I mean,
because they did pay for it, probably.
That's exactly right. Of course, you know, if they didn't, they'd say no, we had nothing to. Of course, they paid for it. So you know, taxpayers paid for this travesty that's used as a sort of a defamation manual for the Democrat degenerate spin machine that just is totally out of control. I mean, these people, you really are reaching the end, I think. I mean, I pinched myself. I never thought we would see the end. But I mean, they are coming unglued. And, you know, the funny thing is they project everything that they are. Now, President Trump has psychiatric issues. Give me a break. These people are totally delusional. And I know this firsthand. You work with someone like Roger Stone. You see things, you witness it up close, the whole Tom Arnold thing, not to get sidetracked. I was with Roger Stone when all this went down. Literally, I was working for him in New York, you know, helping him with some projects there. And the defamation case, there was no coaching Leanne Tweeden. And same thing with Newt Gingrich, as I said when I was in with you guys last time. When you work up close and then you see the reality going on, and these people paint this ridiculous picture on camera and to the public, and it's diabolical. That's all I can say. Diabolical.
They are the ones that have the mental issues. They suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, and it's about to blow up.